probably my favorite of the four we've talked about. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rotham.
Mhm.
And that was probably the hardest thing I'm going to say all day. So I'm going to give myself some credit. When I went into this, I was like, man, we've had what, 7 Spider-Man movies in the last 16 years? Because the first Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, was 2002, and Tom
Yep.
Holland's was the 6th one, came out last year.
Yep.
And I was like, after Homecoming, I thought that was pretty good. We don't need Spider-Man animated film. Like, we just don't need this right now. So I was very reluctant to go see it, and then I just kept seeing on Twitter and on review sites, I just kept seeing people saying, "Wow, this movie is really, really wonderful. There's so much to love about this movie. Like, the animation's great." And I was like, okay, I'll go check this out. And I was fucking blown away by this movie. Not only do I think it has probably the best voice cast that I can remember in recent history. I mean, we'll get to that in a second, but I think the story, for being something that didn't make total sense, was still told in a way that you didn't really care. You just were kind of along for the ride. And it had so many different uh, points of happiness, sadness, excitement, like thrill. It was thrilling at points. Like, I was just blown away by how effectively they did this. And then the after credit scene to kind of wrap things up and be bringing Oscar Isaac in for probably the sequel. Dude, I couldn't be more hyped for what the Spider-Verse could be moving forward. Did you like this movie as much as I did, though?
Yeah, I thought God, it was such a refreshing film, and like you said, very unexpected. I too was not jazzed about this movie existing. I was like, we don't need this. The DC animated movies are pretty successful and done pretty well, but they don't release those in theaters. I was like, you're awfully confident, Sony, to put out an animated Spider-Man movie right after you put out Venom and after you've loaned Spider-Man to Marvel. I was like, it was a weird move,
Yeah.
um, but it worked. I mean, another another win for Phil Lord from Lord and Miller fame, right? He
Yeah.
co-wrote the screenplay, and I think the screenplay is really smart, really snappy. Miles Morales immediately feels like a real character, really fleshed out character, like he is in the comics, and it was a real origin story that was not grating and tiresome the way a lot of them are. The way because we've seen so many, it was different,
Mm-hmm.
and the arc Miles goes on when he finally fully becomes Spider-Man, right? And like when he does that big dive in the city, like and the music really accompanies that well. So I think that whole arc, the whole basic framework of the movie, I think is really well done. And as you mentioned, it's been effective for a lot of people. A lot of people really are engaged with the film and touched by it. And then it has tons of great moments once the movie really expands, obviously, when the Spider-Verse other Spider-Mans come in, right? But even before that happens, before the movie gets like bigger and wider, I thought it was doing really well. I thought Brian Tyree Henry, again, having a banner year, really nailed it as the dad, and
Mm-hmm.
sold that as a relationship. And then the way they set up Mahershala as his uncle Aaron, right, the
Yep.
Prowler, and then the way they reveal that, I thought that worked amazingly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, God, I was really blown away, and again, so surprised by its success. And it's made over $100 million already domestically, so it's doing well. They already greenlit a sequel, and just another win for Shamik Moore, who's the voice of Miles. I really liked him in Dope, and then he was on The Get
Mm-hmm.
Down, which didn't last very long. So nice to see him back. But yeah, I think the whole voice cast was good, and you mentioned the animation. The movie's beautiful and stark in such a way with the colors that we haven't seen in other animated movies this year. So really refreshing, and I think it's the second best superhero movie of the year after Black Panther, in my opinion.
Wow. So you put it above Incredibles then as your favorite animated superhero movie of the year.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of Incredibles. It's weird because I think Incredibles 2 is a much more conventional action film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Spider-Man actually gets to use the comic book feel and touch as a strength, you know?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
usually that's a very bad thing when you try and make a comic book feel on film, but it actually
Mhm.
worked this time. And I think partially because it's animated that helps. But yeah, it's I'd like to see Incredibles 2 again because I really liked that when I saw that too. It's a tough competition, but it was a good year for it.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy if because I think Pixar almost always wins the best animated movie category, and Incredibles would seem to be the one that they would probably be putting up there this year. And I think Spider Verse has a real chance to overtake it, not only because of the story and the different beats of it being refreshing, but the animation is so different than almost anything we've seen. And I think it has a very comic booky type of animation to it in a way. And it kind of like slows down the animation at points to like highlight parts of the action or like
Right.
things going on, like the Spidey sense like part. I thought they did really well and effectively. Or like when they're having in the final fight scene, they're the Peter Porker would jump in sometimes, and then that would be a completely different animation with Miles. And then there was the anime one, and then the noir Spider-Man. I just thought it was really delightful. It's funny because I think I like this more than Black Panther, if only because while this did have that like third act like big fight scene, I felt like the way that they kind of put it together and what it's centered around seemed to be a little bit more. I don't know if grounded is the right word to say because it's certainly not grounded. I mean, it's
No.
like a bunch of like it's a pig fighting with all these different types of Spider-Man, but it just feels so much more. I don't know, less maybe like less paint by the numbers, so to speak. Like it was like in Black Panther, it was that was a refreshing superhero movie for how different it was from the other ones. But then the third act is very conventional. It's a bunch of
Yeah,
things fighting against each other and big rhinos and whatnot. It comes down to Black Panther versus uh,
Killmonger.
Killmonger.
Hmm.
But then in this, I mean, it kind of came down to Miles just finding himself, and I think that that's probably what I liked most about the story was it was about all these different superheroes being true to them and finding their inner strength and being able to take that leap, to steal the line from the movie, that leap of faith. Um, I think that that's different from a lot of what the other superhero movies have done. Even Black Panther, it kind of came down to just Black Panther being able to outsmart Killmonger in that final fight scene. So um, it's going to be higher than Black Panther on my top 10 in a second here, and we'll talk about that. Uh, just quickly before we move off it, I mean, this like I mentioned the voice cast. You mentioned Shamik Moore, but Jake Johnson, Haley Steinfeld, Brian Tyree Henry, Mahershala Ali, Nick Cage, John Mulaney, Lily Tomlin, Zoe Kravitz had like what 2 lines? Like
Mary
Chris
Jane.
Pine had like 7 line readings. Stacked. Which one other than Brian Tyree Henry and Shamik Moore did you like the most?
I really like Chris Pine for his brief moments. But I think the best was Nick Cage. I thought Spider-Man Noir fucking ruled and was perfectly used.
Yeah, so it was fantastic, and the whole Rubik's cube thing was freaking hilarious. Like,
This is blue, right?
so so good. I like John Mulaney. Also, I saw a video of him doing the noise, like the sound
Oh,
effects
I love
for
seeing that
Peter
shit.
Porker. It's freaking so fun to
So
watch. If you
good.
haven't seen it, just search for it on Twitter.
Bradley Cooper doing Rocket Raccoons, the
Oh
same
yeah,
thing. It's the coolest shit to watch.
definitely. If you haven't seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I really can't recommend it highly enough. Probably my biggest surprise of the year in terms of where I went into it and how much I liked it coming out.